1 year after the Wii U and 3DS eShops closed, the gaming devices bearing those names have become shells of their former selves. Now, with online services of those platforms being a thing of the past, the gaming landscape for these discarded systems is a completely different beast. While the single-player scene has some great titles, other titles like Super Mario Maker, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U have been heavily impacted by the missing feature. However, no game was more heavily impacted on the Wii U than the squid shooting inkfest that started it all, Splatoon. Most of today's kids and squids first experienced the series with Splatoon 2 in 2017, or even later with Splatoon 3 in 2022. And there's nothing wrong with that. After all, Splatoon did premiere as a new IP in 2015 during the latter half of the Wii U's lifespan. And for a console that was beginning its death throes, Splatoon at least let it go out with a splash of color. And what a splash it had! Splatoon 1 became an instant classic on the console, and, in my opinion, is one of the best games on the Wii U's roster. Unfortunately, with online functionality gone, the main multiplayer keeping the whole game together is gone, leaving it virtually unplayable outside the main single-player story mode. Sure, you could play it on third-party servers, but official Nintendo online servers for Splatoon 1 are done. Before the final ink blot dropped, I spent the last few days enjoying the game and playing the game as much as I could. And let me tell ya, the nostalgia was real. The year is 2014. E3 has just announced a new line of adorable figurines known as Amiibo, along with the latest Zelda installment, which would later become Breath of the Wild, and Yoshi's new game, Yoshi's Woolly World. Amidst all the fanfare for these hard-hitting franchises and adorable figurines, sat a plucky new IP known as Splatoon. It was a neat third-person shooter, where you played as a squid trying to literally cover as much turf as you could before time ran out. It seemed like such a fun idea, and when fans of the concept learned the game was only 10% complete back then, they became even more excited. I know I was intrigued from the very start, and that's saying something for me. Out of all the genres I enjoy, shooter tends to be pretty low on the list. With as family-friendly as Nintendo tends to be, it was also interesting that they'd make their own IP for the shooter genre as well. But this wasn't like the gritty, hardcore titles that normally embody a shooter. This was quirky, silly, and bursting with color. Literally, it had this 90s flair, which makes sense as most of the game devs were 90s kids themselves. However, this was still a new IP, the first one Nintendo had fully developed since Pikmin, back in 2001. This IP was also premiering on a platform that was largely seen as a failure, even by Nintendo themselves. So it was risky to put so much effort into a title that many people would probably never play. That said though, Nintendo went all out. I remember seeing a splattering of commercials. We were practically coated in coverage. They even did a Splatoon Direct that covered what to expect in the game. And if that didn't convince you to want Splatoon 1, nothing would. They even had Amiibo released alongside the game. There was even a global test fire for Wii U players to try, so they could see the game for themselves instead of a demo, which was a really cool idea and got people even more hyped. The hype around the launch was at a fever pitch, as everybody interested wanted to see this new IP succeed. Finally, on May 28th, 2015, Splatoon 1 launched in Japan, and everywhere else a day later on May 29th. Nintendo's newest IP was here. I still recall picking it up from GameStop while hunting for Amiibo. I had my reservations at first, but after playing it, I was hooked. Wait, they don't exist yet? I remember booting up and seeing the Squid Sisters for the very first time. Unlike Off the Hook or Deep Cut, who introduced the stages in the sequels, the idol pair of Callie and Marie take up that responsibility. I'll give you some time to get the pun. Oh! I've always liked the banter between these two, and you could tell whoever made the dialogue had a lot of fun, especially when it came to Splatfests. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The Squid Sisters would always greet you the moment you opened the game, letting you know what stages were available for both Turf War and the more competitive ranked battles. If there's one thing I've taken away from the iconic duo, it's their closing line for every broadcast. stay fresh. A saying I often use saying goodbye to people to this day. When you start the game, you have a few options, but the main ones are multiplayer and the single-player campaign, Octo Valley. The rest you can't do without playing at least a little bit of multiplayer and ranking up a bit. And while the main point of the game was the multiplayer, I'm a single-player kind of guy, and I played Octo Valley first. And I'm glad I did, because Splatoon 1's single-player campaign is a great set of training wheels that will get you ready to splat before you know it. Captain Cuttlefish starts by warning you that
the Octavians are coming!
Thanks, Captain. Why does he look at me with those eyes? Where you're thrown into the thick of it of taking down the Octarian menace. The level design is simple enough to teach you the basics, and it gets progressively tougher as you advance through. You can use the splatter shot, but you also have other different weapons to try. The Octoling sections were really tough because it felt like what would eventually become multiplayer. But in a way, it trained me for the real thing. There was also one very memorable moment near the end of the single player, but we'll get to that later in the video. Alright, let's get to the main dish. The real fish and chips of Splatoon 1. Multiplayer. I mainly played Turf War, where you team up with 3 other players and face off against another team to coat as much of an area as possible in your color of ink. All while shooting your opponents, turning into a squid, swimming around in ink, and more. It's the main mode for a reason, and one of the big things that made me fall in love with the series. There were a ton of different stages, and I wound up playing a decent amount of them and reliving the rush of the past. You'd think after spending hours upon hours playing the newer titles, that I'd be a natural returning to this tried and true classic. Yeah, I wasn't that good. Even losing though, I still had a ton of fun. I also got to play with friends like my Nintendo Mantelferox, thank you for joining me on my splatting adventures, as we played the game as much as we could before the very end. I mostly played Turf War as that was my favorite mode and because I never really was a competitive player, though when I did try it with Splatoon 1, I won on a fluke, so maybe I'm better than I thought. Or just lucky. Anyway, it was really cool replaying Splatoon 1. While some weapons and kits have relatively few changes, it controls differently than Splatoon 2 and 3 in a lot of ways. Namely, in using X instead of B to jump, your character moves differently. The specials were more of an instant use thing here, and the map layouts in Splatoon 1 are surprisingly different, and in some ways better, than their sequel counterparts. And of course, there's the gamepad. Instead of hitting a button on a controller to access your map, then tap the screen if you want to super jump, spawn a teammate, or a squid beacon in said map. I can't show it off, the game's dead now. It took some getting used to going back to the original map view, but I was fine after a few rounds. Ah yes, the Splatoon lobby. So relaxing, so calm, so plain. Yeah, it was pretty basic. Splatoon 3 players are spoiled being able to move around an entire giant lobby. We didn't have that back in my day. The animations are a lot different compared to the later games too. But honestly, they're a lot funnier. When your squid wins, you get really happy. Hands and weapons in the air as this peppy music plays. But when you lose, woo boy, it's a bad time. The music gets all sad and depressing and your inkling either looks sad, disappointed, or even enraged, complete with pounding on the floor. The game lets you know when you win, but when you lose, you lose. Fuck you. No, I'm a failure. Why? After the battles, I got a decent amount of in-game cash, so let's visit the shops again. Yes, even in the early days, you had a weapon shop and shops for your headwear, clothes, and shoes. Of course, even these have changed from the sequels. The original Ammo Knights, instead of using a license card you would get after every level up to purchase weapons, weapons would cost money like everything else did. Obviously, I would not be able to buy every single weapon until the game went kaput. There were a lot of fun outfits you could get, but one that Mantle told me about was the Squid Girl collab. Apparently, Splatoon did a thing with Squid Girl, a popular manga and anime about, you guessed it, a squid girl. I know nothing about the series, but I kinda wanted it, especially since it's only in this game and none of the sequels. It was difficult, but you could still get it in the shops if you were lucky. Or if someone we were playing with was wearing the gear, we could just order it from them and buy it in-game the next day. No microtransactions required. I couldn't afford to get every single weapon in the game, but I made it a vow to get that squid outfit. But until then, I played more matches in my quest to do so. I tried all sorts of weapons, but one special I really liked using this time around was the Kraken. I never was into it in 2 or 3, especially since it wasn't even in 2. The baller being the closest thing to it, but there was something about waiting until just the right time, being able to catch other players off guard, only to turn into a powerful monster and pow! Splat! It's so empowering. Yes. Yes. Uh-oh. I tried to be as experimental as I could after all. This was my last few days with the game. I wanted to see everything it had to offer during this final hurrah, and while playing these matches, a lot of memories came back. While practicing to get better nearly 10 years ago, this game became such a hit on the Wii U, arguably one of the best games on the dying console. It convinced a decent amount of people to get the Wii successor. I played for countless hours, loving everything from the gameplay to the music. Oh yeah, the music is so good! From the moment I heard Splat Attack, I thought it was an instant bop. The Splatoon 1 soundtrack has such an iconic 90s feel to it. Some of the most interesting and unique scores in the game. Some might say it's a bunch of gibberish with techno thrown in, but it's much more than that to me! I really enjoy the soundtrack of this game a lot, and it hypes me up to dominate whatever area I'm in with as much ink as possible. I also love how the music changes up in the last minute of the match, with Now or Never. It really intensifies the end of each match, basically giving off the idea that every second counts. Every drop of ink could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Make every moment count! You have 5 seconds left! Judd the Cat will not be merciful! My biggest memory looking back at Splatoon 1 has to be the Splatfest. For those who don't know, Splatfests are huge in-game events where players would split into teams, each one being led by one of the Squid Sisters, and splat for 24 hours in order to see who is declared the winner, based on popularity and battles won. I always loved these as it felt like players banded together to form a sense of community, but my absolute favorite part was the themes of the Splatfests. Usually they were centralized around a topic like cats versus dogs, burgers versus pizza, or past versus future. But there was also some really fun ones too, like SpongeBob versus Patrick, or Autobots versus Decepticons. There was even a Pokemon one where you could choose between Pokemon Red and Blue, or regional ones exclusive to Japan and Europe. The big one that ended it off was Callie vs. Marie, and that was a spectacular way to close the doors on this game. So special that it was the first Splatfest to go up to 48 hours, 2 whole days. Team Marie wound up winning the day, which also was cool because it made an impact on the plot of Splatoon 2. I won't say how, play the game yourself. I'm no splatty spoiler. Overall, these Splatfests were the most amazing part of the multiplayer. They were huge events each time, and I looked forward to every single one. After all, it's not every day you get to fight for the Patrick Star and the Optimus Prime. They were some fun memories. On the last day of Splatoon 1, I decided to stream it on Twitch, and I had a blast while doing it. We played a lot of matches, and I'm glad to say I won more than I lost, and got some cool gear doing it. I even managed to eventually get enough for that Squid Girl outfit we talked about earlier. And I have to say, I pull off that look quite nicely. It was a lot of fun splatting, turfing, and releasing the Kraken in its original form. It was great getting to play this game one last time on this nice trip down memory lane, but I didn't want it to end quite yet. I could think of no better way to end my time with this game than by taking on the final boss of the single player, DJ Octavio. Yes, the final boss, the Octopus DJ who will remix your face, is the most memorable boss in the game by far. It's a fun fight that gets more challenging the longer the fight goes on, and the music is pretty hyped too. But it all rises to a boiling point when you reach the last phase, and you hear the song Calamari Incantation.
About time! Turn it up! It's the Sisters!
This song is not only one of the most iconic songs in the entire franchise, but it's plot relevant, both in this game and the later ones. It's a great conclusion to this single-player campaign, and I love it. It always hypes me up when fighting this Octo baddie. I dodged his attacks, he launched his big bomb, I played Dead Man's Volley and launched it right back at him, and just like that, the fight was finally over. I beat the game one last time before saying goodbye to it. And then I was done. It was nice to revisit the game one final time. And even though it's gone, at least I got to say farewell to it. It was a unique experience going back to where it all began. Seeing the roots of the series made me realize not only just how good the game started out, but how much the franchise has evolved over time. How the mechanics have changed, the story and characters and idols have changed, and how the music has consistently been great since day one. Yet with all the improvements the sequels had, there's nothing quite like the first. This game was a warm, nostalgic hug for my heart, and I am going to miss being able to play it like I used to. Yeah, with the online gone, the main part of the game is gone too, but you could still play the single player and fight DJ Octavio all you like. Unfortunately, if you want to play Turf War, it's sadly no longer possible. At least not without Protendo or emulators, but that's another story. The game made a huge impact on me, and I would not be who I am without taking a chance on this silly Squid game. Not that one. Splat long and prosper, Splatoon 1. Thank you for being there, and remember to stay fresh. But hey, look on the bright side. We still have Splatoon 2 and 3 to enjoy. But who knows how much longer they'll be around until they're gone. Oh no. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you like what you saw, hit the like button, and be sure to check out my other videos too. Special thanks to these amazing people for helping me with the video. I couldn't have done it without all of you. Also, an extra special thanks to my Patreon patrons, including Mantelferox and Savacom. You help make every video possible and all means so much to me. If you'd like to join our Patreon, the link is in the description below, along with my Twitch and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good night.